Hi everyone, thank you for joining us for February's Stampin' class by mail. My name is Brenda Cardinal of stampintulip.stampinup.net, and I can't wait for you to make your beautiful cards using the Honeybee suite of products. I've teamed up with fellow demonstrator Gina Wieselman to offer these Stampin' classes by mail. This month, it's Gina's turn to show you how to stamp and assemble your cards, and next month it'll be my turn. Make sure to watch to the end of the video for a sneak peek of next month's card designs and for some bonuses for signing up for March's class. Have fun making your cards. Here's Gina.
Hi everyone, I'm Gina Wieselman of mysweetpaper.com, and I can't wait to show you how to stamp and assemble your Honeybee cards today. We'll be using the Honeybee stamp set, the Celebration item Golden Honey Specialty Designer Series paper, the Daffodil Delight 1/4 inch ruched ribbon, as well as some elements from the detailed bee dies. In addition, one of our cards features a coloring technique, so we'll be using a Daffodil Delight Stampin' blend. Please reach out to Brenda or me if you need any supplies, or if you'd like to talk more about becoming a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator or hosting a Stampin' Up! Event. Let's get started. Our first card is this pretty Coastal Cabana card with the gold foil bee and designer series paper. If you purchased your class by mail kit from Brenda or me, everything you need is cut to the right size and shipped to your house in your kit. If you are not purchasing a kit from one of us, here's a still image of all the parts and pieces you need for this card with measurements. Go ahead and pause your video if you need to, cut and prep everything, and then come back when you're ready. The first thing we're going to do is stamp the images for our card, and we'll be using the Memento Tuxedo Black ink pad. I'm going to start with the long skinny piece of Coastal Cabana. With your kit, this is long enough for all 3 of your cards. So as you ink up your hello stamp, you're just going to want to stamp close to one of the edges of that. And you can go ahead and stamp all 3 of your greetings right away. There's also plenty of extra if you end up a little crooked or don't like the way one of them works out. There's more than enough for you to really get it centered and straight exactly how you want. So I'm going to take my paper snips and just cut at an angle and then cut at the same angle on the other side. Okay, and that's ready to go. The other stamp that I'm going to do is for the inside of the card. Now you could use another one of the greetings from the stamp set, but I'm just going to take the bee stamp and add that so that there's a little something on the inside of the card. That is all the stamping for this card. So I'm going to start with assembly. Take my card base, grab the bone folder, okay. And then I'm just going to build up layer by layer. I'm going to be using my snail adhesive, and I'll start with the inside of my card here. Get that inserted. Now, before I add the black cardstock, the basic black, I'm actually going to layer the other pieces on it first. And the reason I'm doing this is because whenever I have a skinny strip that goes across, I like to make sure that I can trim off any excess if it's a little bit too long, just so that I have nice clean lines on the card. With this, I'm just aiming for equal borders on all 3 sides and straight. And the same thing with this piece of designer series paper. Looks good. I'll take my skinny strip of basic black. And this is going to go right down the middle. And it looks like there's just a tiny bit of extra. Okay. But that way I have it nice and squared off. I'm going to add this layer to my card base. And then I'm going to bring back the little hexagons as well as our bee. Both of these I'm going to adhere using the Tombow liquid glue. And the bee I already die cut for you from the detailed bee dies. And this is actually where the hexagons came from as well. You can punch out a whole bunch at the same time, and it also gives you kind of the outline piece, which we'll see in another of our cards that we're making. So with my Tombow multi-purpose glue, I'm going to come in and just place a tiny bit on the hexagon. And I'm kind of just placing these to appear random. So I'm going to have two that are kind of close to each other here. Just diagonal. Oops. And then I'm going to have a couple more. I might just apply the glue right here. And one more off to the side. And the placement isn't really important for these. It's just to bring in a little pop of color and provide some contrast against that black Designer Series paper. I'm also going to use the liquid glue on the back of the bee, and I'm just going to bring a little bit of it to a few different points. I love this glue because it is strong, so I'm not worrying right now about getting it at every single place, just choosing some of the bigger areas. And I'll glue the bee down. When I'm placing this, these two cutout stripes, I want to make sure that I'm not getting any white showing through. So I'm just going to use that as my guide for where to place the bee. And then the last thing we need to attach is our little hello. And I'm going to use mini dimensionals for that. So I will just put a couple on there, peel up the backing. And place in the corner. And that's all for this one. Our second design is this month's Fun Fold design. And here are all of the parts and pieces you'll need for this card. Once again, we're going to start with stamping using our Memento Tuxedo Black ink. And the stamping on this card is very simple. It's just a greeting and accent on the inside. So I'm going to take this piece of 2 by 5 1/4 inch Whisper White, stamp Thinking of You, Sweet Friend in the middle, and add this little bee in the corner. Now I also decided to stamp a bee on the bottom of the envelope, so if you'd like to do that, feel free to do that as well. But that's all for stamping on this one. With that simple stamping done, we are now ready to assemble the card. So with this Fun Fold design, it's a little different in that our back, our base of the card, is just a piece of cardstock. It doesn't fold open at that point. So I'm going to start with that basic black base and just add this plain white Whisper White cardstock on top, making sure to center that with even borders all around. Next, I'm going to take the long piece of 11-inch basic black, which is scored in the middle at 5.5. I'm going to fold that in half and then use my bone folder for a nice crisp fold. And then this is going to just go right on the card. So I want to make sure to only put adhesive on half of it, of course. And then I'm looking to center that. Now Stampin' Up's grid paper is quite nice in that it has a 0 marked down the center. So if I just center my paper and then use those grid lines, that should help me in making sure this ends up where I want it to go. Now I'm going to add the Designer Series paper with this wonderful gold accent to the outside. And our greeting on the inside. It is really nice. These papers, the edges should all line up exactly vertically. So you can use that as you're placing the DSP and the inside greeting, just to make sure everything is lining up as you'd like. The oval I pre-cut for you if you ordered a kit from either Brenda or me. So I'm just going to add my snail and put that in the center. And that used the Stitch Shapes framelits. And then last but not least, I'll bring back my Tombow liquid glue, add some to the bee. Again, I'm just trying to get a few points here and there. It looks like there's still one little chad left in there, so I'll pop that out. It would have been smart to do that before I had glue, but oh well. And there it is. I just love the elegance of this card. The black and gold really pop. And I did think about whether I wanted to stamp anything kind of in the background here on the white. I decided not to, just because I wanted to keep it elegant, but you certainly could play around with adding something there. And here it is with the envelope. And now for our final design. Here are all the parts and pieces you'll need for this design. Once again, we are going to start stamping with our Memento Tuxedo Black ink. And again, the inside, I just decided to go with the bee, just as a way to add a little something. So I'm going to do that. The other stamping with the Memento Black right now is going to be the Wishing You Sunshine and Happiness right above the hive. We will be using our Memento Black ink one more time, but right now I want to use the Daffodil Delight and finish up the stamping on the front of the card here. So I love the stamp set that it includes 2 flowers going in the different directions, and I'm going to just use those at the top to create a nice little frame around the words. The sample that I showed you here, I also kind of randomly stamped some of those flowers along the bottom, and I toyed around with whether I like that or if I just wanted to do the 2 at the top. So this sample I'll put together without those, and then you can decide which you like best. To stamp this bee, I'm going to bring out my Stamparatus. And I am using the grid paper. I'm just going to drop that in, use one of my magnets to hold it down. And then with the bee stamp I have cleaned, the one that we stamped on the inside, I'm just going to bring that over here. Doesn't really matter where you place it on the plate, but I don't want it too close to the hinge. Sometimes it gets difficult to apply even pressure if it's too close. But I'm just going to bring in my stamp case to level this out. And I'm going to apply my Memento black ink. Going to close, apply pressure, and see where it's stamped. Now, the wonderful thing about the Stamparatus is this is now able to be used as a template for all of the bees I need. And this way, because I pre-die cut these for you, you should be able to stamp and get them exactly where you need them to go. So I'm just going to apply some snail. And center that. And now I can drop in my first bee, re-ink the stamp, and stamp. And there we have it, perfectly centered, which is kind of amazing given that the die was already die cut for you. Now if I can pop this out, we'll be ready to go. And you could then continue on and drop another one in and stamp for your next cards. We did include an extra piece of this Whisper White cardstock. So if you don't have the Stamparatus, or if something goes wrong, you can absolutely just stamp as normal with the bee mounted to a block onto the paper first, and then fussy cut around it. Now that we have our bee ready to go, I'm going to take my Stampin' blend and add the color to these little stripes here. The Stampin' blends do come with two tips. One of them is a brush tip, and the other one is more of a bullet tip. I like to use the bullet tip in this case because it is a bit smaller and easier to control. But as I'm coloring, I'm being careful. I'm not going all the way to the edges. The blends, because they're alcohol-based markers, they do bleed out a tiny bit. So I always just like to make sure I'm steering clear of the edges and adding and pushing out the color if needed. So there's for that. And actually, I might go ahead and add a little color to the inside of my card as well. One thing you do want to be careful of if you are adding color using the Stampin' blends, it does bleed through a little bit. So you want to make sure to do the coloring before it's adhered, just to make sure that none of the ink transfers through. I absolutely love the Stampin' blends. In this case, we are using just the dark Daffodil Delight, but there's also a light version that can allow for some really great shading of the things you color. Because they're alcohol-based, you also don't get that kind of streakiness that you might get if you were using a water-based marker. We are going to start with assembly here, and one of the very first things that we need to do is situate this hive behind the card. Now, it is kind of a tight squeeze, so you can decide if you want to try to show as much of the honeycomb pattern as possible, or how you want to go about doing that. But what I did is just kind of position it, and then I actually just went in with my snail to start and kind of went over both the larger piece of paper and the edges so that I could get the adhesive enough in place to where I can actually add more. Now, I don't want all of these gold pieces in there, so I'm just going to pop some out. And as it's coming off of the adhesive I just applied, of course, I'm realizing I really should have done that first. Oh well. If needed, I'll apply a little bit more. And I like how that looks, the number that are left. And then what I'm going to do is come through and add my liquid adhesive both to the large hexagons that are left behind, as well as to some of the detail. I'm going to supplement with a lot of adhesive just on the larger piece. And then all at once, I'm going to place this on the black cardstock. Perfect. If you'd like, you can certainly add more or have fewer of these little gold foil hexagons. The next piece I'm going to add is this strip of basic black. And I'm going to just go right about there. Once again, if there's any excess, just take your paper snips and trim that off. And then everyone's favorite part, tying a bow. We're using the 1/4 inch ruched ribbon in the Daffodil Delight color. And I'm just going to come around, making sure that it's nice and flat along the back. And the first thing I'm going to do is cross and pull through just like if you were tying your shoes. Okay. Now with this nice and tight, the strand that's pointing down right now, I'm going to come up and create a loop. With this other string, I'm going to come over the first loop and push up and through. I find the hardest part of tying a bow is keeping this really tight. So I will just slide my paper snips right in and use that to add a little bit of pressure and hold that down as I'm tying the rest of my bow. I find it's easier to keep this little tip of the scissors in than keeping in my whole finger. So now that we have our bow tied, I'm just going to use the paper snips again and trim the ribbon to the length that I like. And now we can continue on with assembly. So I'll take my Daffodil Delight card base, get a nice crisp fold with my bone folder, and I'm going to add the inner greeting plate right away. And then I'm also ready to add this. Whenever I am attaching something with ribbon, I always like to be extra generous with the snail around that ribbon, just to make sure everything stays right where I want it. Okay. The last feature we have to add is the bee. And if you notice on the sample, the bee has a basic black backing on it. And what I actually did is you have one of these cut out for you, ready to go. I just went ahead and cut it right down the middle using my paper snips And that way I will be able to attach half of it to one side and the other half to the other side. So I'll just get a little snail here. And as I'm placing it, I don't want too much of the rough kind of pointy edge to show at the bottom. So I'm keeping that in mind. And then I'll place the other side similarly, just so that there's a little bit of black showing. And that's really going to help the bee pop from the background. With that attached and ready to go, I'm going to grab some of my Stampin' dimensionals. I'm using the big ones here, but you could certainly use the mini dimensionals as well. Peel off the backing and add the bee. You could also play around with placement of where each element goes, but I'm going to stick with having the bee right there. One thing you can do, if there's some open space here and you don't want that much space showing, you can actually add in one of these little hexagons as well. So I might just drop a little liquid adhesive there and add one of these, and that just fills up a little bit more of the space if you want to do that. And once again, you can stamp the envelope, and there's our finished product. I loved playing around with these supplies, and I'm excited to share a few more sample cards. So one thing that I did play around with was our fun fold design. This was the designer series paper I ended up using for the class, but you could certainly use other designs or patterns from the Golden Honey Specialty Designer Series paper. So that's one quick and easy card. Another sample that I have is something that I received in a swap from Sandy Carlson. And I just love the use of the ribbon here, some creative punches and layering going on, and really making the greeting the focal point of this card. This sample I really like because it gets away from the typical black and yellow color scheme. Couple key things to note here. This bee, it's kind of hard to see, but it's actually heat embossed using black embossing powder on vellum before I die cut it. And I just thought that added some really fun shine and texture to the layers of this card. The black and gold striped pattern in the Golden Honey Specialty Designer Series paper is so elegant, and it just shouted wedding to me. So I decided to use the Good Morning Magnolia stamp set and some more Stampin' blends here. And you can see in this sample the use of the dark and the light shades of the same blend and how they work together to create some beautiful coloring. The last sample I'm going to share with you was definitely very much inspired by this card design in the Stampin' Up! Catalog. I really wanted to try my hand at creating that card and see how it looked when I did it. The background of this card is using the shimmery white cardstock, and I first started by doing a watercolor wash with that using the aqua painters. So I really got the cardstock nice and wet and then added in some color in the 3 different colors that I was using. And those are terracotta tile, pumpkin pie, and crushed curry. So I filled that in and shaded with the aqua painter. That, of course, had to dry completely before I could continue with assembling. And so during that time, I went ahead and used the detailed bee dies to cut out a bunch of the hives. I also cut the vellum and used, again, the black embossing powder to emboss the greeting. This beehive is stamped in 2 colors. It's the crushed curry and pumpkin pie, and I used the rock and roll technique there. So I started with the lighter color, the crushed curry, fully inked the stamp up, and then just kind of rocked it on the pumpkin pie ink pad to add that coloring around the edges. I added the color terracotta tile to this bee using a sponge dauber, and then assembled and put everything together. Thanks for participating in this month's Stampin' Class by Mail, and here's Brenda with a few more things for you.
Thanks for demonstrating how to make those amazing cards, Gina. Check the email that shared the video link with you if you are a Kit subscriber to find the specially curated Pinterest page that Gina and I put together with even more fun ideas for making use of your stamp set. March is my turn to design and share the cards with you, and I can't wait to show you a sneak peek of the 3 card designs. The cards feature the Timeless Tulip Bundle by Stampin' Up! Found in the January to June 2020 mini catalog. One of the cards features a pop-up fun fold inside the card. I'll be using the Timeless Tulip stamp set, the Tulip Builder Punch, and the Pleased as Punch Designer Series paper from the Coordination product release. The Coordination product release also features new dies that coordinate with stamp sets from both the January to June 2020 mini catalog and the Celebration catalog. The Pleased as Punch paper is unique because it was designed to coordinate not only with the Tulip Builder Punch, but also with the Heart Punch pack and the Umbrella Builder Punch from the January to June 2020 mini catalog and the Small Bloom Punch from the Celebration catalog. I'll also be using linen thread and petal pink striped ribbon. My designs also use the classic label punch, the everyday label punch, and the new Label Me Fancy punch, as well as the layering squares dies and the stitched shape dies. The non-tulip punched images and die cuts will be provided with your kit supplies. Make sure to check your email from Gina or me, or reach out and get in touch with one of us if you are not on our email list to learn more about a referral bonus opportunity. If you find new friends to participate in our Stampin' Class by Mail, you and your friends can earn some free items. And don't forget, it's celebration time. Celebration is one of Stampin' Up's biggest promotions of the year. For every $50 you spend before shipping and handling and tax, you get to select an item from the Celebration catalog for free. That means now is the perfect time to stock up on supplies such as adhesives, envelopes, or a prepaid paper pumpkin subscription. Or maybe even get the stamp set, punch, die, or embossing folder you've had your eye on. There are also bonuses for hosting a stamping event or joining the Stampin' Up! Team during Celebration as well. Be sure to check it out and get in touch with Gina or me if you have any questions. Please let us know if you have any feedback on our Stampin' Class by Mail. Happy stamping, and we'll see you next month.